new book called Heaven and Earth argues that the United Nations, most national governments and thousands of scientists have been duped into believing the world faces catastrophic climate change unless carbon emissions are drastically reduced. None of that is necessary, according to Plimer, a two-time Eureka Prize winner who's Emeritus Professor of Earth Science at Melbourne University and Professor of Mining Geology at the University of Adelaide. He says human emissions of carbon dioxide do not create global warming. He claims there's no global warming at all because temperatures are actually dropping and that geology shows that climate change is part of the Earth's natural cycle. In a moment, we'll be joined by Plimer in the studio.
The book is already in its third print run after only a week and a half. Margot O'Neill, Lateline.
And Plimer joins us now in the studio. Thanks for being here.
Good evening.
OK, is it really your claim that climate scientists have banded together in a kind of gang to commit a scientific fraud?
Well, the IPCC is a group of fellow travellers who reinforce each other, but they're looking at the atmosphere. They're not looking at the total system of the planet, which includes the influence of space, the influence of sun, the influence of the oceans, ice and the earth. So this book is a holistic view of the planet. They are taking one part of the planet out and just the atmosphere.
OK, it's a reasonable imputation, though, to suggest that they might be perpetrating a scientific fraud if you go by what's in your book. I mean, the culture of believers is now developed. They survive by playing safe to acquire research funding. You keep making this analogy to getting research funding being the main driving reason behind their science.
Well, there's not much research money around. And if there is a war on cancer, then there's more funds go into that war on cancer. If people are frightened witless about frying, then there's more research money goes into that. Now, there's a small coterie of climate comrades who review each other's work, be it a research grant or be it a research paper. They use the same set of data, and for some really surprising reason, they actually come up with the same conclusions. And I'm arguing their view is a very narrow scientific view, and that science is much broader than their small view.
So you say they've got everything to gain. I mean, you just heard what Mr. Brooks said. I mean, it's just absurd to think that people just get together and agree on a party line before these IPCC reports.
Well, Barry Brook is a biologist. He's done some very good work on the mass extinctions of macrofauna in Australia. That was the work that I referred to in the book. He's not a climate scientist. He's done no climate science. He should be complimented that his work is getting airtime in the public domain where it never normally would have got airtime. Barry's a colleague of mine, a good friend of mine. We're in the same building at the University of Adelaide. He's
pretty disturbed by what he's seen in your book, and he's not the only one. I mean, Professor Kurt Lambeck, who's joined other Australian scientists in criticising your book, he says you've ignored or twisted information. He, like you, is a geophysicist.
Well, I'm not a geophysicist.
Well, he's a geoscientist.
He's a geophysicist who's done a lot of work on sea level changes.
Let's go back to your book, pages 98, 99, where you tackle the issue of NASA's claim that 2005 was the hottest in recorded history. You state that NASA had to reverse, and I think you've just repeated it a moment ago, NASA had to reverse that position on the basis of work undertaken by Toronto-based statistician Steve McIntyre. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's correct?
Well, that's the claim of the statisticians, that NASA was wrong, and NASA withdrew as a result of that. Those statisticians also showed that the frightening curve that you once showed, where we're going into this period of unstoppable global warming, was in fact grossly wrong. And
you claim that NASA now states the 4 top years of high temperatures are in fact in the 1930s.
That was in 1930s. There was a date in the 1920s and one in the 1940s.
OK, you mean the hottest global temperatures were in that period?
No, the hottest US temperatures, not the hottest global temperatures. Yes. They occur in mid-latitude deserts. Yes, they don't occur in areas such as the US, which is not a mid-latitude desert.
So, in fact, what NASA changed was a series of figures on data of temperature in the USA, which made very little or no change to the global mean temperatures. Isn't that correct?
Unfortunately, we have 30 years of satellite and balloon measurements of global temperatures. They are not in accord with the other ways we measure temperature, which is done with thermometers in areas where we've got a huge amount of heat given out by villages as small as 1,000 people. And so one set of data where we use a thermometer gives us a completely different story to when we use radiosonde balloons and satellites. And if we've got two separate data sets, to start making claims, as we've heard from many meteorological centres, is absolutely erroneous.
But your book on those pages essentially claims that in the 1930s we saw the hottest years on the world record, and that's what NASA had to change.
We saw them in the US.
You actually said the correct thing here. It's in fact in the United States. It isn't in the world, is it?
Well, the first thing is that global temperature is a very difficult thing to measure. Secondly, we have a huge bias in the measuring stations, and they are mainly in Western countries, European countries. They're not in areas where we might get very high temperatures, such in the deserts.
Okay, but this mistake about what NASA did to its figures about global mean temperatures repeated on a huge number of blogs put out by climate skeptics. Now, is that where you got your information on those pages?
I don't know what a climate skeptic is. Can you explain to me what a climate skeptic is?
Someone who's sceptical of climate change.
I'm not. I'm arguing that when you look at the history of the planet, climate is always changing. Now, you're pushing these points very hard, Tony. Now, if I embrace your party line...
It's not a party line.
Are you going to respect me in the morning when I embrace your party line?
This is the NASA line from the NASA and the Hadley Institutes. Now, they're two of the main institutes for checking global temperatures. If one says that the temperature has gone down, that global warming has stopped in 1998, if one says that, as you do, you've surely got to back it up.
Can you explain to me then how a measurement of a temperature today, by ignoring all of history, which you're now doing, which is terribly dangerous, can you explain to me how measuring temperature today is going to tell us anything about the future?
Well, I mean, I wondered that when I read your repeated line that what happened from 1998 to 2010 tells the picture of what's going on right now. Because
Chapter
it seemed
2
to me
is called History. Did you read that?
I did, yes. But it seemed to me that in the end,
sure?
Yes, it seemed to me you'd fall. No, it did. It's about all the periods of interglacial warming, etc.
No, wait a minute. It's also about the cooling, and it's also the effect that warmth has on humans, where they thrive, and the cooling which depopulates humans. Now, that is a history of humans. You are ignoring history and looking at today's measurements and trying to predict the future, and that is erroneous. That's what this book is about. It's about saying, let's look at the whole planet as it is. Let us forget what's happening today. Let's intertwine that with everything. Let's look at what space is doing, and let's look back in the past. You, unfortunately, are trying to ignore all of history, and you do that at your peril.
Well, I think what I'm doing is actually quoting what you repeatedly state
out of context,
in your
because
book.
Chapter 2 is on history,
yes.
Chapter 3 is on the earth,
I know.
Chapter 4 is on ice, Chapter 5 on water.
Yes, that's true, and I think I said we don't have time to talk about every one of those chapters, but on one of the key things that you talk about repeatedly in your book, that the Earth has been cooling since 1998.
No, the key thing I talk about in the book is the Earth is dynamic. It's always changing. And my argument with the climatologists, and climatology is really just modern geology in action, my argument is they're forgetting time and they're cherry-picking small amounts of information. This book is a comprehensive view of the way the planet works, written for the average person who feels helpless and disenfranchised by the sort of bullying that they get from scientists and various media networks who have got a bias, who are pushing their story. And as I ask you again, if I follow the party line, are you going to respect me in the morning?
Well, I respected you enough to bring you on the show to talk about what you're saying, and we certainly all took that view when we asked you to come here. So I suppose the answer to that would have to be yes. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.